Yeah, welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today to talk about all things in your journey that have been really interesting, from more traditional legal all the way to really being a figurehead and leader in the world of bringing the cooperative structures into the space of blockchain and DAO. And really, through my own personal search and journey, you're one of like a handful of lawyers who I think are really exploring this model. And I think it's really fascinating as we're like kind of building new structures and new ideas for how we can coordinate and what that looks like. So grateful to have you here today and to be working together more and more. With that, I'd love if you could share, where are you calling in from today and what is your main focus these days?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm excited to work with you and to explore a lot of these opportunities further and share, kind of scream them from the rooftops for people who are looking for some of the solutions that we offer, that we've been working on. But I'm based in Denver. I'm originally from Kiev, Ukraine. We immigrated with my family in the late 80s. Yeah, and I am a managing partner at Launch Legal and senior of counsel at Jason Wiener PC.
Fantastic. And what is your main focus at Launch Legal and Jason Wiener?
So I come from more of a traditional corporate and securities background and practice. I dove into the Web3 space in 2016, and it's been a deep, long, fulfilling rabbit hole since then. So I would say probably 70% of my practice currently focuses on Web3 clients and the Web3 industry, but generally the foundation is corporate and securities. So everything from formation and corporate structuring. My preference obviously is things that are a little bit more complex and nuanced, and solving those problems in terms of structuring, and then securities with respect to fundraising, capital formation, creative, unique structures that really balance the interests of issuers and founders and investors. And also, models that include token issuances and kind of leveraging some of the technology that allows us to be a little bit more creative.
Fantastic. And you've had really extensive background. Like I always go through people's bios, and it's like you're starting in more traditional legal. You worked in like anti-corruption and white collar investigations. You were working in-house at a few different places, like a unicorn startup. And then to your point, like have made this shift into 70% of your work being around Web3. What helped you with that transition? What ultimately was the thing that brought you into a focus around Web3?
For me, what really attracted me to Web3 back in 2016, 2017, as a female founder at that time, I had a startup that I was working on, particularly in the legal tech and lawyer co-working space industry, or kind of field, and I was looking for access to capital. And I think that a lot of roadblocks, I guess, that occurred or that still occur for a lot of female founders, I faced at that time as well. And so it was kind of, needing to prove MRR and needing to prove a lot of things in terms of ideation and scaling that other founders potentially, especially male founders, didn't have to face during that time. And they were sort of selling ideas on a whim, and we're raising a lot of capital for it. And so being introduced to blockchain and crypto and the ability to create kind of capital formation around this new digital asset class, which was agnostic to your background or your gender, was pretty mind-blowing for me. And so back in 2016, 2017, it was still the kind of ICO days. So it was a little bit less structured, but just that concept of, look, there's different ways to access capital, and it can be pretty fundamental in the way that you access it and what it can do for you. So that was really the major pull in for me.
I love that. One of the things that really magnetized me to you was you and Jacqueline have been pretty solid thought leaders around Colorado's cooperative laws and the way that DAOs could find maybe a path to more like legitimacy and security with that model. Can you share a little bit about what a limited cooperative association is? A lot of people may be more familiar with the term DAO, which is a decentralized autonomous organization. And typically they've been built in the past on top of like more traditional LLCs, but you've actually been exploring a new model around LCA. So if you could explain the two differences for anyone who may not be familiar with that model.
Sure, yeah. I mean, LCAs are essentially cooperatives. Cooperatives have been around for a very long time. The LCA, the Limited Cooperative Association, is a little bit newer, and it allows for a multi-stakeholder membership base. It allows for an investor membership class as well. And we really found that the overlap between DAOs and LCAs or co-ops is really aligned in terms of values alignment. So the goal, or kind of the main principles with LCAs, is this one member, one vote concept. Is that the LCA is designed for the benefit of its members. It's not sort of that traditional hierarchical extractive corporate structure, and it doesn't have some of the limitations that LLCs have as well. So it's really kind of more flat in terms of governance, in terms of economic distributions as well. So in terms of the flexibility that it affords DAOs and internet native communities and organizations and projects is pretty fluid.
I'd love to hear if you're able to share like who you've worked with to set up an LCA and like why ultimately you felt that that was a good model for their maybe digital community or network.
Yeah, sure. So the couple that we've shared publicly are Opolis, the Employment Commons. The Employment Commons is essentially like a decentralized employment organization that's geared for the self-sovereign worker, freelance worker, operating in Web3, but also in Web2. And by setting up an LLC that's taxed as an S Corp and becoming an employee member of the co-op, you sort of plug into the rewards mechanisms by kind of utilizing the co-op itself. So you receive patronage distributions in the form of work tokens by running your payroll through the co-op, and that's a model that really works. It's very cohesive. It allows you to be compliant and allows you to kind of gain sovereignty over your employment. Another one that we've set up is called SongADAO. And that is based off of the work of Jonathan Mann, who's created a song a day for the last, I don't know how many years, but a very long time. And he essentially rewards users within the co-op and buying kind of NFTs and participating from that perspective.
I love that. What do you think has been the most exciting thing that you've been learning in this process of helping either creators or communities move into like an LCA model or consider an LCA model more so than maybe a traditional DAO structure?
For me, the exciting part is that organizations can really tap into kind of community-owned models and models that are led by stewards or in furtherance of a specific purpose. I think that that's been lost a lot in kind of traditional corporate structures. So seeing, some of the perils that we've come across with big tech and these big corporations that strip away the rights and the freedoms and the even kind of the economic wealth of the participants and the contributors. This is kind of the inverse of that. It really allows the rewarding and the it creates a reward mechanism and incentive alignment for people who are contributing, that they get rewarded based on what they put into, these organizations through the LCA model.
Yeah, again, like looking at the article, like I think one of the things I loved most about kind of learning about this space was the DAO structure feels like a little bit more difficult to understand. Like, what would it look like to actually have economic benefit from like a utility token, which is like what people have typically been doing. And what you shared here is like really great examples of like an employment commons, right? That has different member classes, and they are participating and actually like active in that member class in some way, whether it's through work or other criteria set out in like the bylaws of how participation is measured and quantified and tracked. And with that, you can earn patronage, which is like a portion of the revenue that the cooperative is producing through their efforts, whether it's through the benefits of, to your point, Annapolis, like shared resources of like, healthcare and insurance, all the way to, producer cooperatives or consumer cooperatives like REI. And you actually kind of list out those examples. So it's one of the kind of more tangible steps I felt like I could learn and understand, and actually is very rooted into a long-standing history of cooperative culture. One thing I think is really fascinating is just like how few people are really discussing this right now. Like there are very limited law firms who are even discussing this. And then I believe, I don't want to misquote, but that there's like kind of only 7 states who are pursuing this, and that Denver or Colorado in particular is really leading the charge here. Can you share a little bit about like what this movement is looking like and where it's happening and kind of who the players are?
Yeah, I mean, the movement has been happening for quite a while, and I think it started on the digital side of things with platform co-ops. So that sort of is the precursor to the DAO co-op, and that basically allows for a Uber type or a Lyft type, like shared services economy to live online using some kind of like either jointly or collaboratively created platform where people are actually using it, and then the more they use it, then kind of that's how that cycle works, where they're being rewarded for it as well. So Colorado, through the work of Jason Wiener PC, has really landed on the map for kind of the co-op structures that have, and then the co-op entities that have arisen out of the state. I think we have a fairly friendly environment. We're also known as the Delaware of co-ops, just because of all of those things, the kind of the regulatory clarity. Linda Phillips was involved in taking the Uniform Limited Cooperative Association Act and bringing it into the Colorado statutes. So we just have that expertise here, and also I think just a general mentality of shared ownership and exit to community that is thriving, and bringing more people here to mirror that as well.
And is it correct there's only kind of like 7 states who are using this framework right now?
Yes, and then plus the District of Columbia.
Got it. Amazing. You mentioned a few people who are kind of really instrumental in that space. Is there a person or a company right now that's really inspiring you in the space of LCAs, and why?
I wasn't really prepared to talk this much about LCAs. I was thinking I was going to be speaking more about my investing experience. So I was actually going to speak about somebody else that's really inspiring me at the moment, and that's Caitlin Long, and what she's doing for Web3, and the kind of the massive fight that she's had with Custodia Bank and the federal government. And I think that she's somebody who's going to create a lot of, ultimately, even with the setbacks that she's faced, she's going to create a lot of opportunity for other folks in the space. So Caitlin is based in Wyoming. She's been influential in some of the regulation and legislation that has come out of Wyoming that has been incredibly progressive for the Web3 space. I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, she started Custodia Bank, which has a speedy, a special purpose depository institution license in Wyoming, allowing it to custody digital assets. They were applying for a master account through the Federal Reserve and through the OCC, which was denied, even though it had initially been promised to them. And there were some setbacks in review and delays, and so there's some technical nuances on why it wasn't ultimately granted. But I think it sort of was part of the cascade of this general choke point 2.0 and this coordinated warpath that we've been seeing against crypto and banking crypto. So it's very similar to what happened with choke point 1, which was just a general prohibition on payday lending and some of these sort of non-traditional financial products that the government didn't want to support. So I think what we're seeing here is very similar. And so she's kind of been crusading, using a lot of her own resources to fight this at the federal level, and it's been an uphill battle. So I commend her for having the strength to do it and to not giving up. And I know that she's unearthing and disclosing a lot of wrongdoing and overreach by the federal government actors that hasn't been put to light before, hasn't been questioned. So I really hope that there's change and that these regulators aren't allowed to just act, broadly and potentially in an ultra virus way outside of what they're supposed to be acting or how they're supposed to be acting.
Yeah, outside of their scope. Wow, that's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. That's actually even better, answer to this, and something I'll definitely be sharing in the transcript and the notes here so people can follow along on Caitlin's journey too in her profile. Maybe we have an interview with her in the near future. What advice would you give to somebody getting started? Maybe somebody who does feel more aligned like Caitlin, or other communities that are really trying to come up with like alternative forms of, to your point, capital formation or coordination or patronage for people in a more distributed way?
I would say just, make sure that you have good advisors along the way, ones that are experienced, whether they're lawyers or tax specialists or just kind of subject matter experts. I think it's really valuable to have that in the design stage of whatever venture you're trying to build out. I think there are a lot of very similar minded people, so it's just finding that tribe and building with them. I think that once you kind of tap into that tribe, everybody is very collaborative and supportive and wants to see the general ecosystem succeed. So there's less of that kind of competitive nature that we saw in, the early 2000s and Web 2.0 tech startups. I think that, that kind of value system is so different at the moment. And I think that people who don't work well in that kind of environment, know that they're not in kind of the right place, and they don't function well. So that would be my kind of very broad advice: is find good advisors early on. I think there are a lot of them, and there are a lot of people who are willing to jump on the phone and help. And then find your community and find your tribe. And it's so amazing that you can find them on the internet, on Twitter and Discord. When we were sort of coordinating efforts around the conflict in Ukraine, around the war in Ukraine last year, I put something out on Twitter, and was within 24 hours we had set up a DAO. And part of that DAO was Tyler Mori of Upside DAO and some of his colleagues at PiFi, and we had people that were willing to contribute their resources, their knowledge, their effort. We're on calls day and night. I mean, it was mind-blowing to see that in action around a social cause. And it had so much impact. So I think that if you have enough sort of passion, it's pretty, cohesive to now tap into that talent pool. using some of the tools that we have.
It's so powerful and such a powerful example, and also so beautiful how large the world is, but also how small it is, and how easy it is to kind of find your tribe when you put out the bat signal, to your point, and Tyler and Upside Down and many others, and in the leading edge of these tools. It's really special. How can we keep in touch with you personally as a founder, a builder, a advisor, and then also with Launch Legal and Jason Wiener?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Muchnik Yev. You can reach out to me at launch-legal.com. I'm always happy to take a 15-minute or longer call to talk through ideas and to kind of, contribute what I can from the legal side in assisting projects. And, I think of it as a public good. So I'm always happy to collaborate. So please reach out to me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing in the space, for your thought leadership, for the things that you write, the spaces you show up into. It's such a pleasure and so beautiful to see how you're building this space, and consider you part of my advisor tribe. And so I'm just so grateful that you were able to join us and share your story today. Thanks, Yev.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks, Alana.